Last Pint Productions presents The New Way podcast. The New Way contains adult content, including TV shows from the 70s, TV shows from the 80s, and TV shows from the 90s. Feel free to listen ironically, millennials. Listener discretion is advised.
You remember a character named Hermie? Help me out.
Hermie's the elf that makes toys, but really wants to be a dentist.
Oh, the little gay dude! He's not gay.
I'll show you the tool that's most important to our survival, but fair warning, it's my penis.
It should be noted that at a mere 10 years old, James' passions include, in no particular order, her family, God, and grilled cheese sandwiches.
You want us to go to Dallas?
Yeehaw!
Everybody wants to be naked and famous. Everybody wants to be just like me. I'm naked.
Will you help teach me about this? What is it? A new way?
30 years old. Fucking old.
Dirty 30.
And welcome.
Old for you, man.
Well, welcome to the New Way podcast. We really bungled that intro, but I'm going to keep it unlike our first one. So I'm glad this podcast started off with the current adult age of Emma Watson. You are listening to the New Way podcast.
In the jungle.
You are listening to the New Way podcast where we break down pop culture so you don't have to. We're socially distant, so I am alone in the studio, but we do have Mr. Ben Wilson on the mic at his house right now.
Oh, hello.
Joined by his lovely wife, Elizabeth.
That's me.
And, of course, on the bottom screen, Mr. Nick Santacroce.
Thank you for not messing up my intro.
Because he likes it on the bottom screen. You know what, guys? I'm juggling a lot of things here. The fact that I get any of the words right is kind of amazing. Yeah. You might remember a few weeks ago where I stumbled over Kevin Bacon so bad that I had to just literally end the podcast. So hopefully that won't happen tonight. We'll see.
Is there any unexpected bacon?
There is sadly no unexpected bacon that I can think of for tonight's show. But
that's what somebody preparing unexpected bacon would want you to think. Otherwise, it wouldn't be expected.
This is very, very, very true. We thank you for tuning in to this episode of The New Way. Last week's episode, our musical episode, I think people have been a little bit late coming to it, other than Ryan, who listened, I think, immediately upon
once it was posted.
Receiving it.
I didn't even realize it was posted yet, and I was just getting blown up by Ryan. So,
well, we did end the I should say you were on the same chat. We all talked about election for another like 7 hours after the last, last 45 minutes of the episode we spent discussing election. We continued that off air and still have not agreed.
My sister finally listened to an episode of the New Way podcast. She listened to the musical episode right there with Ryan. And her first note was that I took too long to get through election. So message noted, received. I get it. I went a little long.
Well, no, I mean, we're going to continue tonight. This is part 2 of the New Way election podcast. And we're really going to, we only got to just get cursory look at it last time. Tonight we're going to really deep dive into it.
We only scratched the surface.
Yeah,
of the psyche of Tracy Flick.
We haven't gotten into nearly Tammy Metzler enough. I mean, there's a whole podcast on her. So
starting today, part 1 of 5 of the election podcast.
I will say, if you have for some reason not listened to it and you're listening to this, stop listening to this episode and go back to the musical, because it is really funny. It's really good. I'm very proud of the work all three of us put in on that one. So,
what do you think about the work that we did on that?
Phenomenal.
Ooh, new drop.
That was the most uninterested phenomenal I've ever heard in my entire life. And I've had a lot of that sex was phenomenal. So I'm familiar with that delivery. But
it was the most incredible episode I've ever heard.
It was better than Cats. We do on a slightly down note. We did lose a celebrity today, Mr. Brian Dennehy. And I was kind of thinking about this after Ben shared that news with me. There were a few actors in the 80s that would kind of pop up in, for whatever reason, they were just in like 2 or 3 or 4 movies that I happened to see, and I would get kind of used to them. It was almost like, I thought these guys were in all movies. Brian Dennehy was in both Cocoon and the sequel Cocoon: The Return, but he was also in a movie called FX that had a sequel as well, where it's him and an actor named Brian Brown, who's in Cocktail, British actor, but Australian, I think. But it's a play with all of these FX artists, and they kind of are pulling off these sort of heists and fake outs with all kinds of stuff that a stunt guy could do or the special effects person could do. It's really interesting couple of movies, but I highly recommend if you haven't seen either of them. It's F/X.
I've seen the original, but I had no idea there was actually a sequel.
There is a sequel, and I can't remember if it's the original or the sequel that has where they push the mannequin out of the back of the truck and the person runs over it and panics. It might be the sequel. I can't remember. But
that's Mannequin 2, the mannequining.
Mannequin 2 is Mannequin 2 on the move. There's a real Mannequin 2.
No, I said Mannequin 3, the mannequining.
Yes, that is correct.
Well, so the ironic part was
starring Brian Dennehy.
I said as soon as I felt bad because as soon as I heard the news, because I mean, who doesn't like Brian Dennehy? He's
wonderful.
Pops up, he does great work in tons of stuff.
Good in everything.
But the first thing I thought of was South Park Bigger, Longer, Uncut, where they're singing Brian Boitano, and then this guy comes out, and they're just like, "Who the fuck are you?" And he goes, "I'm Brian Dennehy." And they're like, "No, I'm looking for Brian Boitano." He's like, "Okay, bye." And just leaves, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so I went online immediately to post a probably not so sincere memorial to Brian Dennehy, and like 10 people had already beat me to it. So I was just like, apparently I wasn't the only one.
Yeah.
But no, I always think about First Blood.
Oh yeah.
And well, of course, Cocoon. But yeah, even up into recent years, like when he was in, like I said, the Assault on Precinct 13 remake, which he was really good in.
He does a lot of he shows up in TV a lot, almost playing the exact same character pretty much every time he's on there.
But solidly in that, I think he's also really well known as Chris Farley's dad and
Tommy Boy.
Tom
Callahan Sr.
Yep.
You can get a good look at a steak by sticking your head up a bull's ass, but wouldn't you rather take the butcher's word for it?
Yeah,
I think I got that one right.
I think you might have.
That's a really tricky one to actually get right.
A fitting tribute.
To Brian Dennehy. May he rest in peace.
No, he was a talented actor. For what he did, I think he did a pretty good job.
Long career, man. He's
really long
been
career.
in a ton of. He was also one of those guys that the first time I saw him on TV, he was probably 50, and he's looked like 50 for many, many years.
Right.
Just always kind of didn't. They always looked old,
50,
so they didn't age.
He was 50 when he's 38.
Yes, exactly. I'm sure his first credit, it was younger. I'm sure he was younger in Cocoon than I think but in Cocoon, I'm like, oh, there's a guy in his late 50s, but that mathematically can't be possible.
He was 41.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Right, yeah. Special effects.
It's correct. I also wanted to bring up before we get into
Cocoon effects.
It's true. It is a movie about people falsely making themselves look younger. So maybe it's based on Brian Dennehy's life. It was a true story.
That was my joke.
Okay,
Come on, man.
I'm sorry. I didn't
spell it out for the people. My humor is highbrow.
I didn't understand it. Anywho, I do. I also bring up one other thing because I kind of want to get an idea of what you guys are. Part of our episode is going to be kind of focused on this in as far as TV viewing goes, but just some things that you guys are watching, because I'm sort of fascinated with the late night TV landscape now and how they've had to pivot in regard to what's happening with social distancing and Corona, and most of their productions basically being shut down. And you've got all of the late night hosts are now doing from home or at home versions of their shows. Conan's doing it, Kimmel, Colbert, Fallon, even the Daily Show's doing Daily Show at home. And then SNL this weekend did their first broadcast, which was kind of interesting to basically watch them shooting sketches from self-shot sketches at home and then producing some kind of animated things and song parodies. And
we've been producing song parodies and recording from home before Corona. Who's going to sing our praises, Matt?
We already did the beginning of the episode.
Beth, can you sing our praises? Can we get another phenomenal? Or what do you...
Good job.
Thank you.
There we go. That was good.
Thank you.
Did any of you guys watch the SNL broadcast this weekend?
We watched it.
Did you enjoy it or not? Not for you.
What do you think?
I liked it.
I thought it was fun too. Some obviously, as always, some sketches are better than others, and I did think that the weekend update was pretty funny and touching, especially at the end because Michael Che, one of the co-hosts' grandparents, passed away from coronavirus, and then plays it for a great joke basically at the end of that episode. But I also really enjoyed when I forgot the name of the actor, but where he's the gamer doing the
Mikey Day,
Mikey Day,
the Twitch,
where Mikey Day, where he's playing like Call of Duty Warzone or whatever, and he just keeps dying.
It's pretty much every modern gaming experience I have had.
No, and I was like, that's the thing is like I played Battlefield, and I was just like, oh, I suck every time. Like I'm the worst player in there or whatever, and I've learned to get by. I still enjoy playing it.
Matt, we got to get you on that Animal Crossing, buddy. I just customized my bedroom. It's bright pink walls. I put up some Patrick Nagel.
Are you an Animal Crossing guy?
Oh yeah, I am now.
Because everyone loves that.
Yeah,
I looked at it and I just does not look interesting to me.
I'll tell you what.
I don't know.
On face value, it is everything I've traditionally not liked in games, but it is just soothing and low pressure, and it is zen, man. It is zen, baby. I'm playing this like I play the smartphone game apps. It's just more fulfilling and better designed. The customization keeps you busy. It's just you could spend a couple hours and you're not amped up. You're not it's just a nice escape right now in these trying times. It's nice to change your clothes and mow your lawn and pick tulips.
Wait a minute. Go back one.
That's right.
You can still change your clothes.
Yeah, I mean,
in real life.
I haven't washed my hair or changed my clothes in a couple days, guys.
See, now Ben and Beth are doing something that if those of you are just listening to the podcast are missing out on our video portion that will be up on YouTube. So you just missed a really great gag that I think Ben forgot we were videoing and now is committed to the internet forever. So
I was trying to have her comment on the distance SNL, but something's happening. We're about to be disabled.
Become a Patreon member and get the link to the unedited video portion of the
That's right. And the next time we'll give you the remote control so you can turn on Ben's vibrating underwear and see how that goes.
One thing. Oh God! One thing I have realized actually with all of the late night stuff and the changes and everything is that John Oliver's show could absolutely always be done from home.
Yeah, and I think
because there's nothing that changes except it's a white background now as opposed to what looks like a set.
The quality is the same, and he's even more motivated. It feels like.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, and even with
the specials.
Oh, go ahead.
No. What do you think, Matt? What do you think?
I continue on.
No. Let's hear it.
I was just gonna say that I think also without the audience, I'm kind of hoping I like the rants and the runs on there, but sometimes it gets a little heavy in the episodes. There's a little too much of that, and I think without the audience, those are going to get pulled back just because they happen in such a vacuum that it's hard to gauge them at all without kind of a feedback.
It's like a show that we've been talking about for the past couple of days, Sports Night. First season or first couple episodes, they have a laugh track, and it's
first 5 episodes.
Yeah.
It's not like John Oliver, which I think it felt genuine and fine before when they had a studio audience. This is forced. I feel like now it just forces you to make sure everything lands, make sure that it stands on its own, and the studio audience is sort of a safety net for him. Not like he ever fucking needed it. And now that it's not there, he's coming out swinging. It is some of the best work he's ever done.
He's doing great, and I think also I'm seeing a lot of really good stuff also with Trevor Noah. His stuff is working, and it's funny, like certain ones aren't. Like Conan's stuff has not been landing very well, I don't think at all without the audience, which is sort of strange because he's not. It doesn't seem like he's playing off the audience normally, but apparently, like I think it is a big part of it because he's not quite on his game without them, and it's a little bit drier.
Well, he's not playing his game.
Yeah. Well, and the one that's super interesting is Stern, because everyone's always wondered whether or not he could he hates New York. He hates getting up in the morning. He's always fought against not doing it in the studio because everyone's always like, why don't you just do it from Palm Beach? You know, he's got a house here in Palm Beach. He's happier down here. And he's like, I can't without the studio, without all that stuff. I can't. It's too far outside my comfort zone. And now he's doing it from a basement in the Hamptons by himself with people zoomed in.
Plus, if he was in Palm Beach and all the traffic from the spring breakers and the crowds at the
he didn't have to deal with that shit with where he's at in Palm Beach, man. He didn't care. Like he'd be happy. But it's interesting because he's proving now he can absolutely do the show in almost a vacuum, and it works the same.
You brushed off my joke. There aren't really any more spring breakers, right? They did shut that down in Florida, right?
There are no spring breakers.
There are no spring breakers
except for James Franco with gold teeth,
and there are trash humpers.
And Harmony Korine.
There are people still gathering though, quite a bit.
Yeah, is this like there are no spring breakers, sort of like there are no cats in America? Because I'm not buying it, Florida.
It's it depends on where you are in Florida. There's the famous shot of the two beaches that are separated by like a 10-yard stretch where there's one side packed because their county ordinance is we don't care, and the other side is not packed, and there's patrols guarding it.
Let's get in the same page, everyone.
We're Florida. We don't do that.
That was everybody going on spring break instead of it. There's no cats in America, and the streets are made of cheese. They were like, "There's no virus in Florida, and the streets are made of Fireball
or crack."
Oh God.
Yeah, it's a little crazy here in Florida still, and we don't know. God knows what's going to happen. I mean, I think they're going to reopen things way too soon. It's looking like that is the way that our governor is leaning. And
I blame Rick Scott because I said it once. I'll say it again. I never trust anyone with two first names. As a general rule.
Or that
Rick
looks
Scott
like Skeletor.
Our senator, not our governor.
Yeah,
well, I blame Rick Scott. Is what I said.
Well, you should blame Ron DeSantis.
Ron DeSantis. Yeah, he's
I blame him too.
Yeah, he's it's interesting.
He's Trump's little bitch boy.
Ooh, wow. I like this. I want that soundbite. I love this.
Hey, you stole my line.
So
you live here.
So on to happier Corona things to focus on. We thought today, since we do love to talk about TV in depth, and we did a little bit of some recommendations a few weeks ago, we thought, what if we kind of did a little bit of a deeper dive on some really good recommendations of things you could possibly binge over your lockdown at home. And then I said, you know what? Screw that. Instead, we're going to devote the next hour to the greatest TV show that has ever existed. And you might have heard of it, you might have watched it, but you've never really experienced it like you're going to tonight. And it is The Masked Singer. And we're gonna talk about Masked Singer,
Welcome to the Masked Singer.
where you get to hear things like
So
this.
say it with me, audience.
Take it off.
Take it off. Take it off. Take it off.
I mean,
Just for frame of reference, Beth just took a sip of her wine and then scrolled over stop video, and I really thought she was about to just get out.
She looks like the Kermit with the T meme this entire time. Like, it's none of my business, but this podcast sucks.
so no, we are not going to spend the next hour on The Masked Singer, nor should any show.
Hey, honey, how would you like to be on the podcast?
I loved watching everyone slowly like. I love that Nick hears the who are you,
CSI.
and he starts getting excited, and I was like, The Masked Singer, and he's like, oh no.
I thought you were going to talk about the show where that guy puts his sunglasses on, and makes a pun before they investigate a murder. I could talk about that.
Wasn't that a different Who song though? Or no? What was it? It was Who Are You?
Yeah, it's the same. Yeah, they once they sold it out to one thing, they're gonna sing. They sell it out to everything.
It was David Caruso.
Yes.
Yeah, it was.
Like, I guess this is Hit the Dust. Who are you?
Well, what is the Dustin reference? You got to make the.
Yeah, that wasn't a very good one. I would have gone with Seaman or something like that.
No, they find a dead body in the cul-de-sac, and he goes, "Looks like this is the end of the road."
Ooh, I like
didn't
that.
I didn't set up. I was just
You
doing
missed
the
it.
line.
Wait.
I was
Matt,
doing the line.
you missed the song. Ready? It looks like he just met the end of the road.
Yeah, I spent entirely too much time just getting sound bites from The Masked Singer, which was a clip show this week. I was very upset by that.
Anyways, oh my god, oh my god.
I'm sorry, you don't want to keep going on this?
Well, one of the reasons why my wonderful wife is on this podcast specifically is because I had to come to her for advice, because I do not binge TV shows.
Yeah, you don't.
I have to take them in. I have to do some more. Do it very slowly.
Wow,
man, that line is getting a lot of work.
Yeah, I know, it's getting way too much play. But Beth will absolutely blow through a series in a couple of weeks, and I mean multiple seasons of a series, and so she has a lot more context as far as I think what there are things I would have quote unquote binged, or at least what I would consider a binge. But Beth has watched a lot more than I have, and so I think that she might have some better perspective when it comes to watching. And so, actually, I want to know.
Thank you, Ben.
I text Ben about film. I text Beth about TV.
Yeah.
Well, so that's where I wanted to.
And
start,
no one texts me about anything.
Is what? Oh my god.
Oh, stop it.
And I actually mean I want you to take the mic, because I want to know what's the criteria, and I'm sure it's varied and sort of all over the place, but what makes it something that you can binge? And I know we had a quick conversation last night where we had a discussion about like the hook and how that kind of draws you through a series. So
what about Smee?
Yeah. I mean, for me, just the things that I want to binge, it definitely has to have some kind of cliffhanger. Something that makes me want to just hit play again and not kind of be like, oh, okay, I could watch it later. But what
about a nice romantic plot line?
Sure, I love a romantic plot line.
But you didn't think you were going to like Ben and Leslie, but you changed your tune after a binge session of Parks and Rec, didn't you?
Because they did not start out as romantic interests. They started out as friends, and I'm not a big fan of the plot line where like I get mad when like you can't just have platonic male-female friendships, and that they try to turn every single one into a romantic storyline. Like, let a girl just have some bros, and let's see that plot line develop.
Burros
too.
or bros?
Bros.
Oh,
both.
Okay. Burros.
Leslie can have bros. Ann Perkins not so much. She pretty much dates everybody she's friends with in that show.
Doesn't she even date Tom for like a second?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everybody. And she marries what's his name? Rob.
Oh yeah, that's right. She marries
I forgot his character.
Chris Traeger.
Chris Traeger, that's right.
Yeah.
And
yeah, Parks
Andy.
and Rec, that's a show that I binged within the last year. I started watching it when I got strep throat, and got totally sucked in, especially once I finally got into like season 2.
Well, and I think
it gets its legs.
Yeah, and I think that's a really also part of a thing that's really important as far as what makes something binge worthy and not. Parks and Rec is very much character driven. It's not like there are funny things happening constantly in the show, and they write some really great plots, but you are invested in the characters. It's not just laughs or things. Everybody in it is, you kind of have a stake in their happiness or their future.
Matt? And guess what? I think that is my number one criteria when thinking about binge-worthy TV. The one common thread is, listen, trash TV can be just as bingeable as 6 Feet Under, the greatest show ever made. But you have to be interested in the characters. You have to be invested in the characters, okay? Tiger King, full of awful people. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, full of awful people. But you have to like those characters to watch one episode after the other.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's also, and I think that's interesting. It's why I found it very difficult to binge Sunny. And it was taxing for me to get through it. And the same with Tiger King. I've watched a couple of episodes, but there's an interesting thing to think about when you're binging something. You are often
I didn't binge that either, by the way. I think you're right. I agree with you, but everyone else did.
Well, there's an other side to it. So part of it is that I watched the first 2 episodes via like texting with my brother. Like we decided we were going to watch it live together, and we watched them. I think that Tiger King. So certain shows are fine to binge by yourself, and certain shows don't work well with a single audience. I think Tiger King is great if you're watching with a couple of people and you can riff against it and kind of talk about it. But by itself, which is what I did, I tried to get to the third episode and I fell asleep like halfway through it. I was not as invested because I wasn't commenting on it with someone. It's not. I don't care about the characters. It's just fun to like make fun of it or think about how crazy it is. Versus something like Parks and Rec, I could watch. I'd love to watch Parks and Rec with people, but I can watch in a bubble too because it's so fulfilling.
And I hate to bring it back to Lost, but I'm going to bring it back to Lost. There also are shows during your consideration, right, of what's binge-worthy. Lost is a show that I think worked a lot better week to week when it was event television. It amped up the anticipation. It has that Beth cliffhanger at the end of every episode. It's not as bingeable of a TV series. Now, isn't that how you watched it, Matt? You watched it later.
No. I was diehard from the opening pilot.
I think shows like that work better week to week. And there are just some shows that just are better when you're able to watch it. Like Glow on Netflix is a show that I probably would have given up on if it was week to week and it was that classic TV model. But because you could just watch one episode after the other, shows that maybe start off slow that you didn't want to give a chance, you give a chance, it finds its footing just like Parks and Rec in the second season, and then you're there.
I think Beth would like to refute that.
No,
I wouldn't. I agree. I binged Lost. I was not interested in watching it just because I knew that it had to do with a plane crash, which I have some flying anxiety, so I've never been a fan of like plane crash movies or TV shows. And I had just missed the boat on it. I never watched it, and I knew people were obsessed with it, and I think it just was on TV at a time where I didn't really care about TV or cable or where I don't even know where it aired. But then when Ben and I started dating, he had, I don't know how he brought it up, but he was like, just watch the first episode. And because
Ben loves
I really
that pilot.
wasn't interested.
Not much of the rest of this.
So I watched it, and then I mean, how can you not want to keep watching? And then every episode has a cliffhanger, and so I'm like, well, I have to see what happens next. And I think, did we end up watching the last season live, or was I behind the whole time? I don't remember.
You watched it during the last season.
Okay, so I may have caught up right to the point to be able to watch the last season live. And but it did kind of become a chore, I think, which has happened to me with a lot of TV shows. I've invested too many seasons, and then I have to see it through. But it was fun at the beginning. Lost.
My roommate Ben is watching The Wire again, and he's been binging that hardcore the past 2 weeks. And we were talking about this last night. That's a show that it's an hour show about gritty inner city Baltimore. It's got some heavy-handed material, but it is so well done. It has such a blend of genuine humor and writing. David Simon researched the show for basically 20 years before it could get made. It's just from top to bottom well made. It's absolutely bingeable, despite the heavy subject matter. And he also said, they got out right when they needed to. That show was on for exactly as long as it needed to be. Yeah, and it went out on top.
And that last season's a little zany. And I do remember that show, by the time I got to the fourth season, I slowed. Like the first three seasons, I think are, and I think
we'll get started to show.
Yeah, and we'll get to that. I think definitely in the shows that we've picked here, because I've kind of talked about where I think a show might have fallen off a little bit, and seasons that you're going to just have to deal with that might be slow, or you get to good stuff. But The Wire was I binged The Wire. It was funny before Netflix. I used to just download shows, or I'd buy them. I have a bunch of DVD sets here of a lot of shows that I would watch, and I binged kind of before that on these like long series. And then I literally just burned myself out, and I stopped kind of doing that. I've been doing it a little bit more recently. But yeah, I mean, I did The Wire, and I would meet up with Ben for like our writing sessions, and he'd be talking about like a movie, and I'm like, I just watched the 7th season of Boston Legal, and it's great. And Ben's like, all right, okay, whatever. Just
there
true.
was a dancing baby.
I did love
Ally McBeal.
I did like Boston Legal quite a bit, by the way. That is actually a pretty bingeable show. But
Crane.
Yeah, Denny Crane.
That's what it is.
Like I said, garbage shows are just as bingeable as good shows.
Listen, did you ever watch Boston Legal? Call it a garbage
not
show.
a garbage show.
How dare you?
I haven't
I
seen
am curious though, like you talk about that and just what everybody's like first show that they can really remember binge watching was.
I know. I can tell you, it was two. It was 2 shows that my brother recommended to me. Because I took like a big break from TV around 2003 or 2002. I had moved to like a new place, and I didn't have like a VCR to tape stuff. And all of a sudden, all these TV shows were becoming episodic. I'm sorry, we're calling it serialized, and I couldn't keep up with them. So I would miss out on these things. And the 2 big ones that my brother loved were 24 and Alias. And Alias, I remember distinctly because that was the one I screwed up really bad. That he gave me his season box sets of them, and I got to the 3rd season of Alias, and I put in the first disc, and I'm watching it, and I'm like, man, they like dived into the plot in this season hard. And I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And I'm like, there's so much has happened that like off screen that I don't understand what's going on. And I realized that he mixed the discs up. So I had put in.
You were watching Daredevil and Elektra.
I was watching, I think, episode 10 out of 24. And I was just like, what is happening? This is amazing. And then I had to go back and watch it. And I kept texting him like, what is this? I don't understand.
But I thought Kingpin and Bullseye were Marvel characters. Yeah, I mean, the thing about binge watching is, when was Binge-Worthy TV put in Merriam-Webster? It's a relatively recent term with the advent of Netflix and streaming media and DVDs.
Nick, if you have everything on VHS or DVD, then you can technically binge it.
Yeah, yes, but I think that the advent of streaming made it more of a mainstream practice. My mother certainly didn't sit down with a DVD set of Boston Legal. And watch 15 episodes. But now that she has Netflix, she would.
Yeah.
I've been my first show. There's 2 that I also remember binge watching, and one was Netflix when I had the 3-disc plan.
Oh yeah,
streaming.
Yeah.
Wow, you had the 3-disc plan?
Hell yeah,
baller.
Mrs. Moneybags over here. Keep going.
And for me, it was 6 Feet Under. I didn't watch it when it was live on TV, and so I got into it. And I remember planning when I was going to get my discs so that I would get them all 3 on a Friday, and I would spend the whole weekend watching all of them. And it would be so painful than having to wait to get my next set of discs so I could keep watching. And I would try to blow through those really quick to hopefully get more before the week ended.
Narm.
Narm. And then the other show that I remember binge watching and that I did have on the whole series on DVD was Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Ooh.
And I binge watched that at home because I think I borrowed like somebody's first season. I liked it, and then I bought the whole series and then just watched that.
I think that's gotta be my next one. Everyone tells me I need to see Buffy.
It's a slog. We'll get to it in a little bit. Not because it's one of mine, but because it carries a lot of similarities to one of the ones I wanted to talk about.
I'm not necessarily recommending that journey for anyone at this point.
Ben recommended it to me in 2010/11.
There are parts that are certainly worth it. But,
yeah, I made it halfway through season 3, and I couldn't do it.
I did.
Yeah.
Well, we've had
started dating. I actually borrowed because I didn't want to have to get them from Netflix. I actually borrowed them from Beth when we first started dating.
All I know is that we've had more musical episodes than Joss Whedon did, so suck it, Buffy.
Suck it, Joss. I'm going to call it a binge. The first thing I remember binge watching was actually when I was basically in middle school because my grandparents had the box set of VHS tapes for MASH.
There we go.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say. I thought you were gonna say
no.
Red Shoe Diaries or Hot Springs.
No,
Hotel.
it's it was MASH because
it was Adobe Gillis, and Ben greedily ate up all of those episodes.
Emmanuel.
I've talked about MASH enough on the podcast, so people know I love MASH.
MASH is great.
Of the reasons why I loved it is because it was a family. Like I remember that always being like a family okay sort of thing, even though there were lots of adult themes in that I probably didn't even maybe pick up on then. But
well, it's sort of funny if you want to really like talk about old school binging. I used to watch a lot of shows after school when I was a kid,
Well,
and I would watch like Silver Spoons and Webster, and I always remember like all of these different shows. They would get to the end of their run, and then the next day it would be the pilot, and you didn't watch like the entire series go like straight through. You're just watching an episode a day, and don't laugh at Webster. I saw that condescending look, Beth.
Don't you ever besmirch the name of Emmanuel Lewis.
Goddamn right.
I considered MASH a binge because we would be bored. Like I was bored at my grandparents' house, so we would stick in one VHS and watch 2 episodes, and then stick in another and watch 2 more episodes. So just like,
hey Nana, want to smash some MASH?
Oh God.
Were you aware that even though it was the Korean War, it was a stand-in for the Vietnam War?
No.
Well, you are now.
Yeah. Anyways. No, I consider that a show that I would quote unquote binge just because I enjoyed watching it and continued watching it. But the thing was that it wasn't a procedural so much. It was more like once you know these characters, they're just putting basically new scenarios every single week, which had kind of a sitcom quality to it. And I feel like sitcoms in one way are kind of inherently easier to binge because there's no real stakes. And so it's more of just kind of like, oh, it's these group of characters that you like in a new situation, a group of characters you like in a new situation. And so it's kind of new and fun every episode, but there's no real stakes involved. So you don't have to spend a whole lot of time thinking about it. Because that's the thing is like when shows get too intense, sometimes I'm like, oh, I'll watch 2 episodes and be like, no. Or when I don't like all the characters, I'm like, no, can't do that.
And do you remember the gig shirt, the MASH shirt I used to wear to our shows?
Oh yeah, I remember that
Did
shirt.
You buy that for me? Did you get
I
that?
think I did buy that for you.
I think you did.
At the thrift store.
I didn't know you had it. It was like a cool army green ringer shirt.
I think I bought that.
Yeah, I played many a show in that shirt, and I didn't know you had a connection to MASH at the time.
And then he made you role play as Radar and fulfill some of his fantasies.
Yeah, I didn't know what it meant, but I just went along with it. Looking back, it was a huge mistake.
You're like, now I know why you made me talk like Alan Alda.
It is a weird thing to wear, especially if you don't know the property.
Oh yeah, I had no idea. I'd never seen MASH before. Well, I just knew the theme song and the helicopter sound effects.
So getting into it, I guess Matt, you gave us some relatively loose parameters as far as like we wanted to bring a few shows a person. And obviously we're going to drop some names of other shows, but that we wanted to talk about a little bit more in depth. And at least why we consider those bingeable shows.
Yeah.
So
and the one thing I'm not sure.
Don't you want to hear about my first binge though? No one asked.
Yeah, I would like to hear that too.
Okay. Yeah.
It's actually one of my fondest memories of high school. Like Matt said, after school, you had a window of like 3 hours before you needed to be home. And that was spent probably getting into trouble if you were cool.
But watching Batman.
But if you were me, it was Batman the Animated Series or going back to my friend David Egan's, my dear friend David Egan's house. We'd get into his basement and we'd take out a VHS tape that was recorded in the lowest possible quality. The SLP, I think they thought it was like
6
hours
super long
play.
Yeah, exactly. You could fit a ton of half-hour episodes, and it looked like shit. But his brother, before the times of DVD or streaming media, had painstakingly cobbled together in order every episode of HBO's Mr. Show.
Nice.
So not only was that my introduction to that, it was really my introduction to, I can sit for 3 hours and watch the same thing because I love it and it's easy. And that colored my sense of humor for years. I mean, and if you think the David Cross connection, Arrested Development is my first.
You've really changed.
Arrested Development is my first official answer for my list.
Okay.
Because it has David Cross in it. you can watch 17 episodes and think it's only been 2 hours. It's just a delight. It's some of the funniest, snappiest writing ever. It's one of my favorite comedies ever. And there's enough seasons. I mean, you don't have to watch the last two.
Or the last yet.
All
right.
I have people that worked in those last seasons. So
the first three are really
good. The first three are about as good as scripted comedy gets for me.
And I think actually there's a hidden trick with Arrested Development, and that is that it is a soap opera. And it owes heavily to a great older show called Soap. That was kind of a very similar. Arrested Development owes a lot to that show. I don't know if they mention that much, but what's great about Arrested Development is it's absolutely one of those shows that you get to the end of an episode and you're like, one more, and no matter who you're watching with, it's like, yeah, and it hooks you into this long running story and these plot lines, and you are legitimately interested to see where the story and the characters are going to go. It's a great pick,
I'm sorry, I'm going to jump ahead to my other pick, Community. I've been binging that recently. What that has in common with Arrested Development is you've got a great cast of comedic actors at the top of their game, really sharp comedic writing, but running gags that the big fans, they pay off episode after episode. So if
Easter
you're
eggs
binging,
almost.
yeah, if you're binging a show like Community or Arrested Development, a joke that you saw 3 hours ago is going to pop up at some point again. It almost sort of like a little carrot in front of you on the treadmill to keep going one more episode because you're just delighted.
Now, Nick, for our listeners, and I just want to make sure we do this for everybody out there, I believe both of those are Netflix, correct?
Yes, I kind of stuck just to Netflix because it's the most accessible.
That's fine. Yeah, that makes sense.
And Community is something that I am just now working my way back through. I've already seen the series twice. And one of those running gags I didn't know about until recently. Megan Gans, one of the writers on Community, one of the head writers, realized that organically they had made 2 references to Beetlejuice in the series. So they decided to make one more reference to Beetlejuice during their Halloween episode so that someone dressed up in a Beetlejuice costume could waltz past the screen in the background the third time someone uttered
Which
his
I did
name.
not at all watching it as an original run notice or see, and then that also
so fun.
The other great Easter egg, I think my favorite Easter egg in it is that you can see the in the bottle episode where the monkey with the pen. A pen goes missing, and you can actually see the monkey steal the pen in the very beginning of the episode, and the whole rest of the episode is trying to figure out who stole this pen, and it's the reveal is this monkey. But they actually show it, but you're distracted by this other thing happening, and they're like, yeah, go back and watch the episode. You can 100% see the monkey go into the room and steal the pen, which is amazing.
For one episode, Dan Harmon wanted a really cheesy, like, Muzak elevator jazz song. And they ended up getting something that was relatively cheap at the time, Michael Haggins' Daybreak from the album, the same name. And it became a joke because it was so bad, but it didn't become a running joke until Donald Glover decided in a take to start humming this terrible jazz song.
Well, I want you to I want to come back. I want to come back on Community because I want you also. I think we should explain. Like, I think a lot of people know
the rest of my reference.
No, I mean,
anyway,
I think a lot.
Anyway, the song "Daybreak" comes back multiple times.
Yeah, I just because a lot of people don't. You just move very quickly through a couple of shows, but they don't know what a Community is about or why they should watch it or anything. So I kind of want to make sure we're introducing some of these shows.
Oh, so we're doing like pitches. We're pitching.
Yeah, kind of like why you might like this, what other shows it's like, just in general, because a lot of people may not have ever heard of Community. I think most people have heard of Arrested Development. So that one's I think okay, but
see, I went too slow last podcast, and I'm trying to move it along now, and I fucked up again.
It's okay. It's all right.
I'm sorry, Matt.
What do you have, Ben? We'll come back. I want to come back to Community because there's a really good discussion to also talk about what that show launched as far as careers, writers, directors. There's a lot of stuff that really falls into it. I think it's kind of interesting.
Sure.
I'll do one really quick, which is,
but not too quick.
Well, one of the shows I remember watching through really quickly was Freaks and Geeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which it was created by Paul Feig. I believe it was 99 is when it came out. And
like Community launched everybody in that show into a new strategy.
I mean, it's insane because if you look at the way that they casted that show, pretty much everybody who was a major or semi-major lead in that show or supporting actor, they all became huge. We're talking about James Franco, Seth Rogen, Linda Cardellini,
Daly.
John Francis Daly.
John Francis Daly
who wrote Spider-Man Homecoming.
Just insane. And others as well. That Martin Starr, Sam Levine.
Who's also in Spider-Man Homecoming.
Yeah, exactly. It all comes back to Freaks and Geeks. Busy Phillips. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. And it shows, first off, how well it was casted.
Lizzie Kaplan, too.
It shows how well it was cast and shows how well they encapsulated sort of what they were doing well enough that other people were interested in taking these actors and putting them in other scenarios. Freaks and Geeks was 18 episodes. It was one season. So it was a super easy binge for me. I just kept on hearing about how amazing it was, and I watched it over the course of a weekend. Was blown away. Just like, how did this not get a second season? And it won a fucking Emmy. It won a fucking Emmy for Best New Show, and this show didn't get renewed. And that shows you what the climate of television was like in 1999, is because it didn't get the viewership and then got this huge cult following kind of afterwards.
There's a very sad documentary detailing this entire process.
It's a very, and it feels very similar to something else that I have also binged, which was not on my list, but that's Firefly, which was also a one season and then kind of dead sort of thing, but that they're basically kind of yin and yang. Both have people who went on to become bigger stars. Both ended up having huge cult followings after the fact. But Freaks and Geeks, I think, is the big one because Paul Feig ended up going on to become one of the more seminal voices in comedy, in film comedy, over the past 15 years. And there was an episode specifically called Chokin' and Totin', which is the one I wanted to mention, which is hysterical. It's one of the funniest. Linda Cardellini's gets high for the first time, and her conversation basically with a dog about how maybe we're living in this dog's dream is one of the funniest moments like I've ever seen in television. And that episode was directed by Miguel Arteta, who went on to do episodes of New Girl and Succession and Veronica Mars, and like ended up being like a huge like TV director and has had this 20-year career. And it was one of the first shows he ever worked on. So anyways, that show had the power to launch tons of careers, not only actors, not only Paul Feig, who was the creator and writer's career. Mike White, it was one of his first jobs was to write on that show. And Mike White went on to have a pretty, huge career.
School of Rock,
writing School of Rock, directing and co-directing a bunch of stuff.
I watched that entire series in a day.
Yeah.
And it's and you can.
I think I watched it in two. I think I watched it in 2 days.
And if it's unfortunately it's not streaming anywhere, but you can actually buy the DVD or the Blu-ray on Amazon. It's $30, and honestly, I'll reimburse you. It's so worth the one season.
Or if you join our Patreon, I will ship you my DVD set.
This is true. I have it as well, so we'll get you a copy of it if you want to.
So that was my first thought. Beth, what about you?
Do you guys really have a Patreon?
No, but we should.
We could.
Joke.
I was like, I haven't seen any of that money.
Bitch better have my money.
First, we got to get listeners, then we get a Patreon.
Well, I was surprised.
How do you think we paid for that Yeti microphone that you are passing back and forth?
Is that why there's no stand for it? I don't
know. I have this. I don't know
join
where
our
the stand
Patreon,
is.
and maybe we'll be able to afford one for the next.
No, there is a stand. I don't know what happened to it. I bought that mic, and I know there was a stand.
Yeah, cool.
And prefers to handle the mic.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, you're on camera.
Wow, come on.
So you'd like to know my first show that I recommend?
Yes.
For me, that would be Jane the Virgin, which
Nice.
I recently binged. I mean, not super recently because then I caught up and was watching it live. But when I first started it, I binged it on Netflix, which I think some of the seasons are still on Netflix. And I don't even know. I think maybe I really don't remember why I watched it. Maybe Ben was out of town and I was looking for something fun and lighthearted to watch, which is what I like to do when Ben's out of town because I don't want to watch anything scary or like with families getting murdered or anything because I have an overactive imagination.
Lock and key.
Yeah, no lock and key.
So I started that and I immediately got sucked in. And the show is completely over the top. It's kind of a satire, and the main character, Jane, grows up she's Venezuelan and Mexican, and grows up and is in her 20s and still living with her mom and grandmother. And she's a virgin. She's Catholic, saving herself for marriage. And she's like in a long-term relationship with the love of her life, and she wants to get married. And she grew up watching telenovelas, which are like Spanish soap operas, and which are known for being super dramatic and over the top, like way more than regular soap operas. And so they do just a lot of so fun, like over the top cuts and things that she's thinking, and then situations they just start bringing in like those telenovela elements. And even if you're just like a normal white person who's never watched a telenovela and isn't really familiar with any of that, you can still get on board and have fun and fall in love with just this family and seeing these really great female relationships grow throughout the I think there's like 5 seasons, and
and it's all of it's on Netflix. And the premise is that she I mean, happens in the pilot, correct? Like it's sort of the premise of the show. Yes.
Yeah. So she goes just for like a routine gynecological checkup and ends up being artificially inseminated, and then finds out she's pregnant, but she's a virgin, and remains a virgin for quite a while throughout the series, and
until they had to jump the shark.
It's a great premise. And I remember the main actress showed up on like a couple of she showed up on like Whose Line Is It Anyway, and I think Hollywood Game Night, and she was like magnetically watchable. Like she was super
America, right?
Like
no, it is Gina Rodriguez.
America Ferrera is in Superstore.
So
it's the other Latin American actress.
As a normal white person, I fucked that one.
They do not look remotely the same either.
Nope. But yeah, Gina Rodriguez, she's really funny and easily like watchable, and she's got a great laugh and a great smile, and you just fall in love with her.
She's really great.
And I feel kind of like, what's the guy from SNL? Is it Stefan, where he's like talking about all the things that a place has?
Yeah.
That's how I feel about Jane the Virgin. It's like they have, like drug lords, evil twins, like artificial insemination, evil professors, police conspiracies. Like if it has it all, and it's just so fun and over the top, and you can't take it too seriously, but you still it's a really fun, enjoyable ride, and will make you laugh and cry and sit on the edge of your seat all in once. And
nice.
Ben hasn't watched it.
No,
but he would be in the room sometimes when it was on, and he would be like, "What the hell is this?" Because it was always like so over the top, and then like cliffhangers every episode, and it's just really fun, and I recommend it.
No, I'm super excited because you mentioned that when we were chatting the other night. And I really like that pick because it's one of those shows that I heard a lot about, and then I saw her, and it was a little late. Like it was probably like 4 seasons of the show, and I saw her, and I was like, man, she is like, you can tell it's somebody that gives 110% to everything they do.
I thought she was better than Ugly Betty.
Just stop right now.
Nice.
You're gonna get us kicked off the airwaves.
I'm trying to save.
What about you?
Trying to save face here.
You guys disappeared. Beth got angry. Oh, now we've all swapped on the video, so that was interesting. Yeah, so my first recommendation is a series called Justified. Justified is airing currently on Hulu, so you must have a Hulu subscription to watch it. But you can also pay for it on YouTube, iTunes, Amazon Prime, a bunch of places.
I have a feeling I could binge that show.
Yeah. Created by Graham Yost.
Can you justify paying for it on YouTube?
I will. I'm about to justify everything about this show for you as quick as I can.
Justify your love.
I did write a lot on these shows. They're shows I'm really passionate about, and I think a lot of people haven't seen some of them. Created by Graham Yost, he wrote the movie Speed. He also wrote episodes of From the Earth to the Moon, Band of Brothers, and The Americans, which are amazing shows. And he wrote episodes of Herman's Head and Hey Dude, which are less amazing shows, but still interesting in their own right.
Don't you dare.
Bite your whore tongue.
I kind of figured out of all of the lists on there, the thing that he wrote that you would like the most was Hey Dude.
You dare disparage the name of Hey Dude on this podcast.
Not a huge fan of Hey Dude.
All right, Beth.
I preferred Salute Your Shorts, and when Hey Dude would come on, I would change the channel.
Are either of you divorce lawyers?
When I unearthed...
Listen, it's a little wild, and it's a little strange, but they made their home on a range, Beth.
When I unearthed that fact, I was like, the one thing I'm talking about is that Graham Yost wrote episodes of Hey Dude. So I know that will work out well.
In your notes, you're
Graham Yost was probably a 21-year-old.
It's legitimately highlighted in my notes of the main things is Hey Dude.
Hey kid, can you write Hey Dude?
Yeah, he would be a young man.
In Matt's notes, he's like, gloss over Hey Dude quickly, or Nick will derail the podcast.
I have it in bold. It's based on a character from an Elmore Leonard short story. Elmore Leonard wrote Jackie Brown, Out of Sight, Get Shorty, countless things that he's written have been turned into TV and movies over the years.
Anything for Nickelodeon?
Elmore Leonard did not write anything for Nickelodeon specifically, but they've things.
A dark episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Get Shorty.
He did an episode of SpongeBob.
Wait, I Get Shorty. That I think I confused.
All right, Ben, you don't have it.
Nickelodeon show.
Keep going.
All right, anyway, it stars Timothy Oliphant, Walton Goggins, and then every great character actor that has or ever will work walks through Justified at some point, sometimes for an episode, sometimes for a season. You've got Sam Elliott, you've got Mary Steenburgen, you've got I literally made a list, Joseph Mazzello, everybody, and I'm going to get into a couple of these ones. Patton Oswalt, Margot Martindale, Jeremy Davies, a ton of people. The show's very simple. Raylan Givens is a U.S. Marshal played by Timothy Oliphant. He kind of has his own brand of justice, hence the Justified. And the pilot episode shows him in Miami. He's confronted a mobster, and they meet outside on this pier, or not, like an outdoor restaurant out in the ocean. And both of them have guns pulled, or have guns like on them, ready to go. And it's this long, drawn out scene. And Raylan winds up basically doing the Han Solo, shooting first and killing this guy in cold blood. And while the marshal's office decrees it eventually that it was a justified killing, he's had too many of these in his past. So they send him back to his hometown in Harlan.
Justified.
That's right. There it is, the name of the show. They send him back to Harlan, Kentucky, which is his hometown. And he becomes basically a marshal in a very small pond with a lot of people he used to interact with in high school. One of the main ones is a character named Boyd Crowder, played by Walton Goggins. If you've watched Vice Principals or The Righteous Gemstones or Tarantino's last few, Hateful Eight also. Amazing character actor, and Boyd Crowder is one of the most fantastically realized, just three-dimensional characters I've ever seen.
I would love if he hosted SNL and did one of those, like, remember when Peter Sarsgaard?
Yes.
He could do Walter Goggins goggles.
Goggins.
Like a
or he and Kenny Loggins could do a Goggins tour and go out there as well.
You're cooking with gas, Matthew.
Right. So I would say, as far as for people, why you might want to watch the show, it's got a lot to like for people that like Deadwood, or that have liked Elmore Leonard, or who like crackling dialogue, character actors, and showdowns. It is and really honestly, the character actors coming through this show are so good. And what's great is that they set up a very kind of familiar structure each year. You always have Boyd Crowder as this antagonist that's there throughout the whole season, but every season there's also like a big bad and a little bad that he's fighting. The best season of the show, I think, is season 2 with Margot Martindale. She plays Mags, who's basically running a pot operation up in the hills, pot, moonshine, and moonshine that acts as poison, which is a real handy thing to get rid of competitors. She won an Emmy for it. Jeremy Davies plays her son. He won an Emmy for the same season, for the season afterwards, where he comes in more into play. Everybody who's ever been a character actor and worked on something is in it. And I think my favorite tweet about the show is from Patton Oswalt, who also had a great recurring character as Sheriff Bob. But Oswalt said, he goes, I'm watching this before he was on the show, mind you. So I'm watching this week's episode of Justified, and the gas station attendant is on screen for 60 seconds and has a more well-rounded character than people I've seen on shows that have been on for 18 years. It is really there's no wasted scene, no wasted dialogue, no wasted moments. Season 5 is a little bit of a slog. But other than that, the rest of the show is really pure gold. And that season 2, Margot Martindale just fucking kills in that role.
I don't think I'd care for it. Ben, what's your next answer?
I highly recommend it. And it's by the way, it is a 78 episodes. They're an hour long, but it was a network show, so that means it's about 42 minutes as you binge it, and 6 seasons. So it's not too bad of a run to get through on your own.
So only 3,600 hours.
Don't put it that way, but listen, how long was X-Files or Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
Well, I'll get there in a second.
I figured you were going to talk about X-Files.
All right, Nick. What's up? What else you got?
I will recommend Crazy Ex-Girlfriend as a binge show.
Nice.
Another real easy, fun show. But the spin is many of the episodes feature 2 or 3 musical numbers. Because Rachel Bloom, the star, had a background in theater and was a total theater kid, and actually co-wrote a lot of those songs with Adam Schlesinger from Fountains of Wayne, who recently passed away from COVID-19.
I don't care for music, so Ben, what do you have next for yours? Oh, I'm sorry. Continue.
Wow. Sorry. Wow, I'm just that.
We just had an unintentional moment of silence.
Yeah,
it ended up working in our favor. Wow, I'm just so thrown that he would throw my joke back at me when I was trying to pay respect to a talented songwriter. Anyway, the songs are super fun, and it's basically about Rachel Bloom, who plays this girl who had this huge crush on this guy in high school and never could make it happen because she was a huge nerd, and she moves to New York to become a fast-paced lawyer, ends up visiting California on the fly, runs into this boy that she had a crush on for so long, and on a whim moves to West Covina, California.
Of all places, West Covina.
yeah. Which is a whole musical number in the pilot.
Covina.
Maybe the best song in the series. But she moves sight unseen just to start the slow play to make this guy fall in love with her. And it's sort of like got a good cliffhanger at every episode, and it's basically just follows her exploits. But it's fun. It's super easy. It's one of those shows, and I think my main way of deciding on what shows I think are binge-worthy is it fun? Can you watch 5 episodes before you even realize it? And do you care about the characters? And that definitely hits all those check marks.
It's a nice one.
Yep.
Yeah.
I really like the fact where they're always just like, they always reference West Covina. It's like, it's just an hour from the beach, and always somebody like, with no traffic.
Yeah. There's some pretty good California jokes in it for sure.
Nice.
Benny?
What about you, Beth?
Beth?
Oh, you were just gonna pass me over.
I was gonna go to both of you.
I don't know. I didn't receive any information to really prepare for this.
Thanks a
sounds
lot,
like Matt
Ben.
sent out some information to everyone else, but left me out of it. Go figure.
Wow.
I didn't know about. I didn't know that you had interest in this until very recently. So it's all Ben's fault. Is the basic crux of it. So.
But I did make a quick list of shows that I really just try to think about things that I've binged recently or like within the last couple of years. And most of my binge watching does happen when Ben would leave town for work. And
so you haven't binged anything too recently?
Not well. I actually have because even though he's here, sometimes we still
mentally he's somewhere else, like right now.
Play video games or be here on the podcast talking with you guys all night.
What a waste!
Wow. If it weren't for us, you'd never binge anything, Beth.
But the thing is, because Ben doesn't really like to binge watch, and then a lot of
talking about 50 grades of
50 grades of Shay. How dare you? Show some respect. It's one of the greatest literary achievements.
You still can't say it.
No,
music by Danny Elfman.
She's throwing 50 shade, shade. She's throwing shade.
Wow, that was hip and with it.
Throwing 50 shades of shade.
I'm a kid. I'm a teenager, just like you.
I was going to say 50 grays of shade.
There we go.
But because all of the thing is, sometimes I make the mistake of bringing up a show that's definitely binge-worthy for. I'll mention it to Ben and we'll start watching it. But as Ben said, he doesn't binge watch much. So then I have to keep some things just for myself. Like we recently started watching Schitt's Creek and Ben doesn't want to, his binge watching of that is like 2 episodes. I think one time we watched 3, which was very exciting for me because the episodes are only like 20 minutes long.
Yeah, they're so short.
I could literally watch an entire season in one night, but Ben can't. Anyway, not like this show that I'm.
So it's an endurance problem
Ben would have
for him.
watched anyway.
I can't either, Ben.
But so this was a show that I knew that Ben would have no interest in, and so that's why I went on a little journey with that, which was Gossip Girl, which came out in 2007. But I mean, I'm still too old to watch it. But at that point, I was just definitely not interested. I mean, I don't think I really watched TV a lot at that point anyway.
I think you were like the target audience at that point, right?
No, I was definitely too old.
2007,
really? Wasn't I?
For Gossip Girl? That's like a 20s show.
It's a show about high schoolers.
Yeah, but like I knew like most people were in the 20s. Like there were a lot of 20s that were watching that show.
Sure.
It wasn't just high schoolers. Yeah.
I'm still totally into that. Like, show me any show with that demographic, and I'm probably just going to eat it up. I love it. But I had a lot of friends. On your list. I had a lot of friends who loved it and would always reference it, but I never watched it. And so I started and I got completely hooked. And, you know, the premise of the show is just like a bunch of rich kids who go to high school in the Upper East Side, if that's the fancy part of New York. I don't know.
I think it is.
And there's a website with a mysterious blogger who's writing about all of the high school gossip. And the blogger goes by Gossip Girl and seems to know everything that's happening, especially with the main characters of the story. And when I started out the show, I really thought that the main point of the show was like you're trying to figure out who Gossip Girl is. But honestly, I never even cared. So when you finally do find out,
Kristen Bell.
when you finally, she's the narrator for Gossip Girl. But when you finally do find out, I was like, oh, okay, because there's just so much ridiculous, over the top drama. Like none of the characters are like good people, but you still.
None of them?
Have you watched it?
No, people used to tell me that I reminded them of Chuck Bass. Was that accurate?
No, that is not who you want to be reminded of. That's
I know that's a bad thing.
Bad?
Yeah,
that's
bad? Not what they told you.
That's like Paul Mamalito.
Told you
that's
you
Paul
reminded
Mamalito.
them of Lonely Boy.
Aww.
That's honestly the funniest thing I've heard on the podcast in a while.
You don't want to be Chuck. You want to be Lonely Boy.
Nick just left the podcast. He just got up and walked away.
Oh, that's the greatest thing ever.
You'll see. That's just the name. which that guy is the guy who went on to play the main character of You.
Yeah. Penn Badgley.
Badgley?
Penn Badgley.
You know what? Listen, I'm bringing a special guest. I'm going to bring another special guest in the podcast. I know that my roommate Ben will have some nice things to say about me.
Has he watched Gossip Girl?
Have you watched Gossip Girl?
Like a long time ago.
Who do you think I remind you of in Gossip Girl?
Oh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one.
Oh god, it's gonna go so terribly. I don't even know how to start.
What? There's not a character called Lonely Boy on that show, is there? Was that just a joke?
Well, if there was a character named Lonely Boy, you would be it.
You know what?
I couldn't name a character to save my life, gun to my head, but Lonely Boy is you.
Wow.
I assume that is a character.
Unbelievable.
Nick, I'm pretty sure without
back to, so
this is not how I pictured Ben's first appearance in the podcast. I thought you'd have my back. You're my roommate.
It wasn't a diss. He's a very likable character, and he's like the most normal guy on the show who's not like all pretentious and cares about money and everything to begin with. And so they're just qualities of him that I could see in you. I do not see any Chuck Bass qualities in you.
He's lonely and alone. Lonely boy.
All right.
Nick, I do think that you would maybe have fun with the show too.
All right, I'll give it a shot.
And then let me know who you think you are.
Well, I'm not planning on watching Justified, so maybe I'll turn on Gossip Girl tonight.
All right, Benny.
I'll watch Justified.
Justified is one of the few that I think you in particular would really like.
I'm going to go really fast, and it's mostly just because of proxy, but the X-Files, Beth and I both watched the X-Files over the course of about a year. Actually, less than that, more like 6 or 7 months. We got through the first 6 seasons of the X-Files, and then I continued on. Beth had lost interest after that.
I never finished it. Is the truth out there? Was it out there?
Oh, yes. The truth is always out there.
All right.
But everyone knows what the X-Files is. Obviously, it's a cultural phenomenon. It started in 93 and went through... I mean, the movie came out in 98. And which was right between seasons 4 and 5, I believe.
Weren't there 2 movies?
Well, yeah, they made another movie that Chris Carter directed. Actually, the creator,
the wide receiver for the Minnesota Vikings.
Yes, same guy.
All he does: catch touchdowns and direct X-Files.
Yep, that's pretty much what he does.
The deep cut.
But no, so I love the X-Files, mostly. But we talked about how characters are sort of integral to what it is that makes you care about it. And the development of Mulder and Scully was super critical for why that series was so great, because not only did they have a great sort of dichotomy of him being this, I believe in everything, and her being this skeptic, plus obvious sexual chemistry that they decided not to immediately admit to, but just kind of let it permeate over the course of 4 or 5 seasons. They did not consummate any sort of relationship literally until the movie where they almost kiss, and then they don't. It was season 7.
She gets stung by a bee.
Yeah, she gets stung by a bee in the movie. But they were smart about the way that they played the romance in that, but they also just did a great slow burn with how they reveal sort of the bigger picture. They definitely faltered further along in the narrative, but I would say there are 2 great episodes. The first one I would mention is in season 1, which was directed by Rob Bowman, I think. No, David Nutter, excuse me. Which is Beyond the Sea, which had Brad Dourif, and I've actually made Matt Schenk watch this episode.
It's really good.
So for an episode of television made in 1993, it's exceptionally well done. It's exceptionally well acted. It feels like it could be like this Academy Award-winning short film in and of itself.
So it's not one of the monster episodes, then, probably.
It's a Monster of the Week episode.
I love the Monster of the Week episode.
I was going to say, so there are a lot of series that get shit for adopting the Monster of the Week MO, and I think a lot of them do suffer. And the thing about X-Files is that their Monster of the Week episodes typically often were just as good, if not better, than their more serialized stuff, which is a real testament to that show.
I would say with X-Files, a lot of the serialized stuff was obviously always kind of front and forward. but every season, typically one of the 1 or 2 best episodes was one of the Monster of the Week episodes. And the other one that I was going to bring up was Jesse Chung's From Outer Space, which is I think season 4, which is where the X-Files really found its groove in seasons 2, 3, and 4, is they realized that their concept is so bizarre, they could make it as funny and bizarre and crazy as they wanted it to be. And so they started playing with the unreliable narrator, where they had an episode where the whole thing was told and you see Mulder and Scully, but it's all told from other people's perspectives. And from one guy, he assumes that Mulder is an alien. So you see the way that he's acting he's acting like an alien. He's like, well, that guy was obviously an alien. So he's acting like the way they present the movie is kind of like a drunk history. It's hysterical. And so I think that was a super bingeable series because they realized they could play with the narrative beyond the fact that the whole thing was really fun. But you look at the talent that came out of that. I mean, like Glenn Morgan, who went on to do tons of TV, is now executive producer of the Jordan Peele Twilight Zone.
Vince Gilligan.
Vince Gilligan was the executive producer and was really involved.
And met Bryan Cranston by casting him against the studio's wishes in the X-Files and then again in Breaking Bad.
Exactly. Yeah. And so you have these tendrils of where the X-Files kind of reached out into all of these other really, really popular series that ended up being again, Breaking Bad, bingeable series. I mean, I don't think there's any other way to put it. And I think that they took a lot of the DNA from the X-Files and what made it a popular series. Even though it was more serialized, I think that they used a lot of those same tricks that the X-Files used. So that was mine.
It's good one. Did you have more, Nick?
I got plenty.
All right, go.
I got plenty. I like the comedies because I like to binge comedies. I need to be consistently laughing, and it needs to be kind of light for me to be able to really watch 7 episodes in a row. And 2 of my favorite things to watch, and I'll throw these out there quickly because I don't think they're on Netflix, but Spaced, which was...
By the way, X-Files is on Hulu.
Yeah.
There you go. Spaced with Edgar Wright's first... I think it's the first thing he directed.
Yeah.
It was a British sitcom with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. And like you said, eventually just kind of sets the table for their career with Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead. But just a really funny situational comedy. It's a little rough around the edges, but it's super fun to see them, at their beginning.
And it almost pioneered the art of cutaways, as far as a sitcom and TV trope. It was the first place I really recognized seeing like super hard cutaways to these like side stories or past things or whatever are on there. It was really interesting.
Well, I think Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright had the same affinity for tropes that Dan Harmon had, and it's kind of what makes it similar to Community. They would have these stereotypical episodes that many sitcoms have, the stuck in the elevator episode or the broken priceless item episode. They use those conventions to be a strength.
Well, and Community calls them out too. I mean, they directly discuss them.
And then also I would say I think not just one of my favorite British comedies, but one of my favorite comedies ever is Peep Show, which is Mitchell and Webb, the comedy duo, doing a scripted television series. And the gimmick originally was that it was from a POV. Peep Show was always from someone's first person point of view. And they kept that going throughout the series, but you get the feeling that gimmick is really what sold people on the show. And then they just find these characters. They become these characters. David Mitchell is, I think, one of the funniest characters in television in this show. He's so bumbling and sad and hilarious. And the convention there is the internal monologue in between the scripted dialogue, which is just has me in stitches.
And you can watch that on Hulu.
You can. Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And then just real quickly, the other 2 comedy, if you trust my sense of humor, which if you do, God help you. Documentary Now.
Fantastic show.
Netflix IFC, now, IFC. Yeah, the great thing about this show is they spoof famous documentaries. And what's brilliant about it is if you have any understanding of the language of documentary, if you've seen one or two documentaries, you're okay. You don't need to have seen the exact documentary that they are spoofing because it's produced so well, you get the joke. One of my favorite pieces of advice from film school, I don't know if I've shared this in the podcast, is you never dumb down a joke for your audience. If they don't get the joke, it's okay. They just have to know it's supposed to be funny. And this is IFC's like version of that piece of advice. They don't feel like you have to have seen, The Thin Blue Line to get their spoof of it. Yeah,
Grey Gardens. Yeah.
They're just going to produce it really well, and it's going to be funny, and that is good enough. And then when you see the actual documentary that it was based on, you have this newfound appreciation for it. And then also, I've said this before, I've said it once, I've said it a million fucking times. If you're talking about a binge-worthy show,
I just asked you for one
that you can finish in literally 4 hours. Watch I Think You Should Leave, Tim Robinson's sketch comedy show on Netflix. It's if you like Wet Hot American Summer, if you like anti-comedy, if you like Nathan For You, if you like that uncomfortable humor, there's nothing better. Nothing better.
It's good stuff. Yeah, I had one like longer running sitcom on my list of kind of like the deep dive ones, and I picked it because it's really an all-time favorite of mine, but they also have just recently started up a podcast going through and rewatching the show with two of the stars of the show, and it's Scrubs. Scrubs you can watch on Hulu as well. Created by Bill Lawrence, the guy that did Spin City and went on to go and do Cougar Town and most recently Whiskey Cavalier.
Abed's favorite show.
Abed's favorite show, who has his walk on. But yeah, it stars Zach Braff, Sarah Chalk, Donald Faison, and a criminally underrated John C. McGinley, who we brought up recently on our Point Break. Actually, I just realized we have not aired the Point Break podcast yet. That will be coming out next week. But anyway, who did not only not get an Emmy, which he deserved, he did not even get an Emmy nomination for his role as Dr. Cox. And I think it is one of
him and Michael McKean are having a beer somewhere.
I mean, at least McKean got a nod eventually for his guest one. But yeah, I think
for Better Call Saul.
Yeah, he got for his guest spot. He did a guest spot on the one. I don't want to spoil things on that side of that stuff. But,
oh God, yeah, thanks. Don't do that. He comes back.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
fuck, he comes back.
So anyway, there's a flashback. Anyway, Nick, thanks for anyway. So John C. McGinley plays Dr. Cox. Scrubs is a really good comfort food sitcom, except that it also gets very serious and very heartfelt, and it's not afraid to do so a lot of times. And I think that's...
Right, which one? What episode are you talking about?
I can name several, but there's... But there,
the guy from Men at Work,
the Colin, so there's that.
Day after day.
But the problem is there are like 10 episodes I can name of Scrubs where they get very serious. I think the best episode of the show is a guest spot by Brendan Fraser. That is, I'll put it up there against Futurama's dog episode as one of the saddest, hardest I've cried at a 30-minute sitcom.
Brendan Fraser is the dog.
Yes, Brendan Fraser is the dog. No, it's amazing. It's a complete twist ending on an episode that you don't really see coming, and when the rug gets pulled out, it is devastating. It is really one of the best episodes, but they're not afraid to do that. They do it, and they especially like to play with JD and John C. McGinley's character because he's kind of the asshole mentor. But like he'll break down, and then there's this 2-part episode where he winds up losing 3 patients over the course of this one episode, and he goes into like a bad, like dark spin, like just goes and starts drinking at his apartment and goes on this spiral and just talking about how it's just that it's so hard to do. And it's really in the time of kind of Corona and seeing our first responders and stuff out there. I think it's a show that is so ripe to revisit right now. It has some of my favorite just bromance moments between JD and his chocolate bear, Turk, who he calls Chocolate Bear constantly in the show, which always makes me laugh. It might be one of the first times I really saw a full-on bromance, like to where other characters are commenting about like, are you guys in love? And they're like, yes, of course we are. We're like, that's their deal.
What year did you meet Ben?
I met Ben in 2009.
Okay, yeah, I guess that was after.
Yeah, so this was this is 2001. Scrubs started. It goes way back. But yeah, I think check it out. There are some just really, really amazing episodes. And now Zach Braff and Donald Faison are doing a podcast going episode by episode through the show right now and revisiting it and watching it together, which I think is awesome as well. So,
I think the two Pete's from Pete and Pete have a podcast that do the same thing.
There we go. That's Pete cool. And Pete on Pete and Pete.
Remember Pete and Pete?
I have it on DVD.
Oh, you should binge that tonight.
I never really got into the Pete and Pete
thing.
I don't know.
Dude.
I think you were too old.
I was a Clarissa Explains It All fan.
I also enjoyed Clarissa.
Sam's little theme.
All right.
Wow.
But I don't have it on DVD. But I think I might have The Secret World of Alex Mack on DVD though.
Yes.
I don't know that show. That one I never watched.
Man,
I've heard of it, but I never saw it.
Larissa Oleynik of 10 Things I Hate About You.
I never watched
I had
it.
A huge crush on her. She could turn into liquid goo like the Terminator.
What about you, Ben? Ben, do you have another on your list?
If you don't recall, Larissa Oleynik was actually on our original casting for Dream
I
Writers.
do recall she was going to play Lucy, the lead in Dream Writers.
I had a crush on her, but I had a bigger crush on her older, nerdier sister Annie. I have to say, the brunette. You got to see. Listen, Matt. When we're done, you need to get Pete and Pete, all of it. It gets better and better, and then you need to see The Secret World of Alex Mack.
I think I'm going to do Jane the Virgin. I got sold on that one. So
let Beth do one.
Yeah. You got one last one
before I do my last one.
Sure. I thought of it while you guys were talking because I had a list, but I was trying to think of. Anyway, but there's a show. It's on Hulu. And it's still on TV now, I think, but I originally was introduced to it just scrolling around on Hulu. They recommended it to me, and it's called Younger. And it's on this.
I've heard of this.
What? Oh, it's on TV Land, I think.
I haven't either.
But it's about a woman who is, like, I think she's like 40 and just recently divorced. She had a kid when she was young, so her daughter's like going to college, and so that she's. Has like a rich husband, hasn't had to work since she's been raising her daughter, but now her daughter's off to college and she's newly divorced and is trying to get back into the working world. But she's has like an 18-year gap on her resume, and she was like a great editor, but now can't get a job anywhere because obviously the editing world has changed dramatically, and she just can't get a job anywhere. And then she's like at a bar, and a guy mistakenly thinks that she's like in her early 20s, and she can't believe it. And he's like super hot, and she ends up kind of like pursuing that, but realizes, can I pass as someone who's in my mid 20s? So she kind of fibs that she is and gets a job like at a publishing house as like a assistant to just get back in and work her way back up by kind of letting people think that she's in her 20s. And so I think it's like a half-hour show, but it's like a comedy rom-com, and but it's fun because every episode you're like, oh shit, is she gonna get caught? Who's gonna find out? Because it's like people start finding out, or obviously her best friend knows, and how is she gonna keep up this lie? And then she's
like
got a daughter, and then there's like multiple romantic interests, and some that are too young for her, and then some that think that she's too young for them, even though they're her age. And so there's lots of twists and turns, and it's just fun and lighthearted and easy to watch. And that's why I watched however many episodes or seasons were available when I first came across it very quickly, and then had to start watching it week by week when it does come out. But it also can get a little ridiculous, but it's fun and I like it.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I never even heard of the show.
I had never. I have only heard like 2 other people ever talk about it.
And it's Sutton Foster. She's a big Broadway actress.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Cool.
Have you seen Alone Together, Beth, on Hulu? You got to see
She's
that.
shaking her head no.
You would love
it.
Yeah,
you did.
No, you told me to watch it, right?
I did.
So I watched like maybe 4 or 5 episodes.
Oh. Uh-oh. You don't like it.
It's fine.
Oh.
So
But
Ben,
I think you thought that I was gonna
Wow.
love it.
I thought you were gonna love it. I thought you were gonna love it.
so Ben, abort.
I got my last one.
abort.
Very quick, and I'll hit as succinctly as I possibly can. So my last one is How I Met Your Mother. Obviously, How I Met Your Mother is one of my favorite shows, and it's entirely because of the strength of its first 4 seasons. And the reason why is because the creators, Craig Thomas and Carter Bays, who I actually met, remember, outside of whatever that bar was in 2007 at Morgan Jovich's birthday party, which was very strange. It's a show about 5 individuals, really ultimately in New York, kind of, they're all in their young professional life. It all starts when they're 27. And it's basically just about them kind of finding their way. It's basically Friends, but it takes some other twists and turns. But the first 4 seasons are so fantastic. And the only reason why they're so fantastic is because they wrote what they knew. Bays and Thomas were writers on the David Letterman show, and that's where they met. They wrote for the Letterman show for 3 years, lived in an apartment together in New York, and then had a time where they weren't working while they were still living in New York, and then eventually moved to LA. And that's when they developed the show.
I hate Ted Mosby because I hate myself.
It's true.
You mean Ted Lonely
Mosby.
Boy Mosby?
I hate Ted Mosby. I hate the character of Ted Mosby, but I do love that show.
Yeah, but the thing is there are a couple of episodes in that a lot of people will point to, like the pineapple incident in the first episode or the first season, which is one of the funniest, like for a laugh track, 30-minute, 22 or like 30-minute, ultimately 22 minutes without commercials comedy that has, oh, by the way, it has a little cameo by your Winnie Cooper in there.
Ooh, Danica McKellar.
By Danica McKellar. It's one of the funniest, like it's the hardest I've laughed in a short amount of time, which just involves basically one of the main characters getting blackout drunk and trying to recreate the night based off of other people's recollections. Which is a great premise. It's a great premise. It's a hysterical episode.
Drunken Memento.
Yeah, but some of the other there are so many fantastic episodes in those first few seasons where it's just really just leaning on the experiences that these people had. For example, like the Lily and Marshall, which is the couple in the show. One of the big things is at the end of the first season. Spoiler alert! By the way, this is also available on Hulu. Lily and Marshall,
who's not sponsoring this episode, but should.
Yes. Lily and Marshall split up, and then eventually over the course of the second season, they get back together again. But that happened to Craig Thomas. Craig Thomas's eventual wife left him to do an art fellowship in San Francisco. Like all this stuff was real. Like it actually happened to them, and you could tell that show lost its steam once they realized, or once they ran out of the stuff that was real to them, which was in that 3rd and 4th season. And so after that, they were just treading water. So it was
pay attention, Goldbergs.
It was bingeable. It was bingeable for me because I was 23 when I started watching that show, but even though they were 27-year-olds, it was a mirror of my life. Like all of these characters related to people in my life. And so I could not stop watching it. I loved it. I thought it was my favorite show on TV. Those first 3 seasons, I will still say, I think the first, from a sitcom, from a laugh track sitcom multi-camera standpoint, I think are the most indicative of kind of the young adult experience I've ever seen, including Friends. I think it's better than Friends.
Does Beth still have the blue French horn you used to propose to her?
Right. Yeah. But
no?
It lost its steam because they ran out of stuff to write about, and they dragged it on too long. And that actually brings me back to the point that Matt, I think, and really, I think all of us sort of simultaneously made earlier, is that you kind of have to go out on top because otherwise you drag that stuff out. I mean, the X-Files, and How I Met Your Mother and some of these other shows that are insanely bingeable.
Yeah.
Lost. I'm sorry, man, but
Modern Family.
Sure, Modern Family or whatever.
But and another thing that was so great about the show was at its height, it was one of those shows that everybody wanted to guest star on. So they got a couple great moments from other actors. I think it just was inspired.
Some of their best guest stars were after they had already peaked. I mean, like Bryan Cranston, Britney Spears.
Of course, my favorite is Chris Elliott, Cabin Boy himself.
Chris
as
Elliott.
the father who's like unemployed, but like desperately trying to make his career as a board game creator. Chris Elliott just kills it.
Well, and I think that's we talked a little bit about.
Also launched the career of Joe Manganiello.
I'm sorry, Spider-Man 1 when he played Flash Thompson launched the career of Joe Manganiello.
He had a recurring role in the first
thank you very
season
much.
of I Met Your Mother.
I wouldn't want to fight me neither.
But after he did Spider-Man.
It got him the Spider-Man.
I think what's kind of interesting is that you when you're talking about shows trying to go out on top, it is so difficult to do. And I think that's what's really interesting what happened with Schitt's Creek is I think Schitt's Creek actually did it backwards. I think Schitt's Creek did its treading water episodes in the first 2 seasons. I think they did the formulaic stuff, and then I think they fell into a great show, and they knew that if they kept it going, they were going to go right back into the just the same joke over and over and over again. And so they went out arguably as hot as a TV show possibly can. Literally the year that everyone started talking about them, like, yep, this is our last season. It's kind of crazy. The last one I just want to throw on here on my list, my third for this, is a show most people have probably heard of.
Wait, I haven't even gotten to my 8th suggestion.
Yeah, I know. Well, next episode.
Okay.
So this was a very last minute addition by me because I've not actually binged all of this show straight through, but I didn't know that it was actually available. And it's the Larry Sanders Show. And Larry Sanders Show, I watched the later seasons live, and I watched the first. They did like the best of the first 2 seasons came out in a DVD like 7 years ago. And I bought that and watched it, and they didn't release any of it, but you can now watch it on HBO Go. Created by Gary Shandling, about a fake talk show host alongside his producer, played by the late Rip Torn, who won an Emmy for his work on it as Artie. And of course,
also, how crazy is it that we talk about someone who has 2 first names? He has 2 past participle versions of the same action.
That's correct.
That's insane.
And then Jeffrey Tambor as Hank.
Hey now.
Kingsley, who is one of the. I mean, both of those characters are 2 of the best characters created in TV history. It launched a ton of comedy gold from both behind and in front of the camera as far as writers and people on the show. But that's Bob Odenkirk got his start on Larry Sanders, which led to getting to do Mr. Show. Janine Garofalo, Scott
He's
Thompson.
also on SNL.
Yeah,
he was a writer for SNL.
He was a writer on there. Scott Thompson from The Kids in the Hall. And then, of course, all of these celebrities that would come through to be on this fake talk show, the best of which, inarguably, is David Duchovny, who declares his man crush on Larry, which sets off a whole recurring plot line in the show. And some of the funniest episodes are with him. But just for a very quick sample of why this show is great, this is just a small interaction between Larry and his sidekick, Hank, who's very much a Carson's sidekick, Ed McMahon style thing, talking about his famous catchphrase that I just played a second ago.
You know, Hank, I was just wondering why you say that "hey now" thing.
What do you mean?
Well, it's just something that you used on the show, and now you're starting to use it in your personal life, and it's an affectation of some sort, isn't it? Did you ever say "hey now" as a kid?
No, I don't. I probably didn't. But I said hey.
Yeah.
And I said now. I mean, at different times.
I
I never put them together till later in life. So in that sense, it's part of my personality.
You know, Hank, this isn't easy for me, but would you mind not doing it on the show anymore? Because, frankly, I'll tell you the truth.
Wait a minute. Are you telling me that when you do your you do this, that isn't the same affectation? That isn't the same as my "hey now"?
There, you just said it again, and you know, I asked you not to say it.
I can't say it off stage either.
It doesn't even exist. Use hey now in a sentence, Hank.
Hey now, that was real funny.
You know what, Hank? It's not even in the dictionary, hey now.
Okay. This is how I use hey now in a sentence, okay? You say, and of course, my sidekick Hank.
And of course, my sidekick Hank.
Hey now.
Hank.
That's a sentence.
No. Hank, listen.
It is so good, and those characters are so fantastic. But yeah, it's there are 90 half-hour episodes over 6 seasons on HBO Go. So that's going to be one of my summer binges this year, is to get through all of Larry Sanders.
I'm going to split this podcast into 90 half-hour episodes.
Don't look at me. Long. Don't look at me.
It's so long. Hey, I've been real short today. I've been real short. I've had the most recommendations and the least amount of time explaining.
That's what she said.
All right. Don't you want to know what 92 the Moose, Central Maine's #1 hit music station, voted as the most bingeable TV show of all time?
Hey now.
Please.
No.
Hey
you
now.
Don't want to know?
I don't really. We're gonna tie it up unless it's a real good kicker.
Well, it was Breaking Bad.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Breaking Bad beat Friends.
We talked about it.
But Lost and Parks and Rec also rounded out the final 4.
Yeah, nice. There we go. Hopefully we gave you guys some things to think about and watch over the next several weeks that you're staying away from other people as best as you can. These are all ones that we're real passionate about. Obviously, Ben's still doing microphone things that you're seeing if you're watching this on YouTube.
But if you watch any of these recommendations, Beth will agree it should be 6 Feet Under.
And Alone Together.
Yes. Correct.
Which you can watch alone and not together with Beth.
No, I think she's like, no, we can watch 6 Feet Under alone together, but not
alone together. Well, thank you so much for listening to the New Wave Podcast. We're back with new episodes every week until the corona's gone, and we'll talk to you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
That was the best ending yet.